There's no doubt that Duran Duran were one of the biggest bands to emerge from the 1980s. They were a global phenomenon, and that was especially true in Japan, where they were welcomed with open arms. Duran Duran were quite prolific during the decade of decadence, releasing 5 studio albums, 1 live album, and a compilation album. In addition, they released a whopping 20 singles, the majority of which made the top 10. Obviously, with Duran Duran hailing from the UK, all 20 of these singles were available to buy in their home country. And while Japan got most of these singles, Careless Memories, Save a Prayer, and Burning the Ground never made it to the land of the rising sun. It should be noted, however, that Save a Prayer did get released in Japan during 1985, but this was a double A-side featuring the single edit of the album track and the live version from Arena, the live album that was being pushed at the time. Furthermore, there were very few 12-inch singles released in Japan, meaning that the extended versions, commonly referred to as night versions, were not readily available to the Japanese market. But, as we'll see shortly, an ingenious workaround was thought up, which I believe was a much better way of getting these songs out there. In this video, we're going to take a look at each Japanese release on 12-inch format from the 1980s, and then determine if they did in fact get the better deal. As you can see here, I have all the Japanese pressings that were released on 12-inch vinyl during the 80s, and aside from them being extremely easy to acquire here in Thailand, I had the most fun I've had in years doing so, and that was certainly the case when wading through boxes of old vinyl at the local second-hand record shop. We'll go through these in sequential order, and that obviously means we start at the beginning in 1981 with the self-titled debut album. The first thing you'll notice on these records is the inclusion of the OBI strip that wraps around the sleeve and contains information about the album in Japanese, as well as the standard price for each release. Inside, you'll find the vinyl disc in a plastic sleeve rather than the printed paper sleeves we're used to seeing in the Western world. At first, I was a bit put off by these nondescript sleeves, but I've since discovered that they are far superior to the paper sleeves we're used to, as they provide much more protection to the disc. The information and images that adorned the inner sleeve of Western releases can be found on the inserts, as well as additional information and lyrics in Japanese. I especially like the step-by-step instructions for the new romantic dance. As a side note, the North American release of this album does not feature the song To the Shore, as this pressing features the extended night version of Planet Earth, and due to the limitations of vinyl, there simply wasn't enough room to squeeze in To the Shore. Fortunately, the Japanese version stayed true to the original UK release, and does indeed feature To the Shore as the 4th track on side A. In the UK, this album yielded 3 singles: Planet Earth, Careless Memories, and Girls on Film. Planet Earth and Girls on Film were released in Japan on 7-inch, and Careless Memories was completely overlooked, which meant that the Japanese market was denied the opportunity to own the 12-inch night versions of Planet Earth and Girls on Film, as well as the B-sides from Careless Memories, which were a cover of the David Bowie song Fame, and an original composition called Kaneda. But fear not, all 4 missing songs were made available in this Japanese exclusive EP called Night Romantics. As I stated earlier, all these releases come with the OBI strip and the paper insert, so I don't need to showcase each and every one in this video. But I will say that I really do like this method of releasing EPs to cover the songs that were otherwise unavailable. My mind could be playing tricks on me here, but I have a vague memory of some singles back in the 80s being available only on 7-inch during the first week of release, and then the 12-inch would come out the following week, which meant you ended up buying both, which was a bit redundant, but here the Japanese have made everything available in the most efficient way possible. Next, we have the Rio album from 1982, and aside from the OBI strip and insert, it's more or less identical to the UK release. Rio gave the UK My Own Way, Hungry Like the Wolf, Save a Prayer, and the title track, Rio, as singles. Now, I would argue that My Own Way was a standalone release due to it coming out in 1981 and being a totally different arrangement to the album version, but regardless, it is widely considered to be a single from Rio. With the exception of Save a Prayer, Japan got all of these on 7-inch single, meaning they missed out on the extended night versions of My Own Way, Hungry Like the Wolf and Rio, which is commonly referred to as Rio Part 2. The B-side to Rio Part 2 was a remix of Hold Back the Rain, and as the 12-inch version of Rio was never released in Japan, they missed out on that as well. As we saw with the first album, these missing songs were made available to the Japanese market by way of a EP, and this time it was an EP called Carnival. Despite not being available in the UK, Carnival was released in many parts of the world, but contained different songs, and it's only this Japanese release that contained the extended remix of New Religion. In fact, this version of the song wouldn't be available to the rest of the world until 1999, when it appeared on the compilation CD called Strange Behavior. The first song on Carnival is noted as being Rio Part 2, but unfortunately, the pressing plant received the wrong master and were given Rio Part 1 by mistake. Rio Part 1 is the shortened, single edit of the song, so instead of Carnival containing the extended version, it actually contains a version that is shorter than the album track. This was obviously very unfortunate, but the intention to give the Japanese audience what they were missing was there. The remaining tracks are the extended versions of Hold Back the Rain, My Own Way, Hungry Like the Wolf, and the aforementioned exclusive mix of New Religion. In 1983, following the success of the single Is There Something I Should Know, the debut album was given a re-release. This Japanese version retains the same running order as the 1981 release, but now features the 1983 single Is There Something I Should Know as the first track on side A. It's worth pointing out that while the US re-release also includes Is There Something I Should Know, it is still missing To the Shore. Later in 1983, Japan got its first ever 12-inch single from Duran Duran in the form of Union of the Snake. I'm really not sure why this was released, as we'll see shortly that it becomes completely redundant, but nevertheless, fans of Duran Duran could purchase this single on both 7 and 12-inch formats. It's worth pointing out the quality of this product is unlike the 12-inch singles in the UK, which were basically just upscaled 7-inch singles. This one features a sturdy sleeve, complete with spine and inner sleeve with paper insert. The next album was Seven and the Ragged Tiger, and aside from the OBI strip and inserts, it's basically the same as the UK release. As New Moon on Monday and The Reflex never saw 12-inch releases in Japan, there was obviously a need to release another EP, and this time it was called Tiger Tiger, which was available exclusively in Japan. There's a bit more waste on this EP when compared to the previous two, as 2 of the 5 tracks were already available in Japan. As Union of the Snake had already been released as a 12-inch single, the extended remix was already in circulation, and the final song on this EP, which also happens to be the title track, Tiger Tiger, is the Ian Little remix, which was the B-side to the New Moon on Monday's 7-inch single. The remaining 3 tracks are the extended remix versions of The Reflex, New Moon on Monday, and Is There Something I Should Know, all previously unavailable in Japan. The next release to hit shelves in Japan was the Wild Boys single. This received both a 7-inch and 12-inch release. It makes sense that this was released on 12-inch as there were no plans to release further singles from the Arena album. As with it being a live album, extended remixes would have been impossible. The Wild Boys was, of course, the only studio track on the album, hence the reason it was given an extended remix. The Arena album from 1984 is more or less identical to the one I had as a child, with one slight difference, which is the fact that the first side of the gatefold is sealed, meaning that the insert and booklet have to be tucked away under the OBI strip. As A View to a Kill, released in 1985, did not receive a 12-inch release anywhere in the world, we can now jump to the Notorious album cycle from 1986. The title track was the first single to be released, and surprisingly, Japan were given both 7 and 12-inch versions. This one here is what we'll refer to as the standard 12-inch remix, as there was another 12-inch version released outside of Japan called the Latin Rascals Mix. But as I'm sure you've guessed already, that will be addressed shortly. The album of the same name soon followed, and one thing I like about this one is the fact that the insert includes promotion for the albums from the two side projects, Arcadia and The Power Station. The other two singles from the Notorious album, Meet El Presidente and Skin Trade, both received 7-inch releases in Japan, which now brings us to the EP that was released for the Notorious cycle. Strange Behavior was released in 1987 and should not be confused with the compilation CD that came out in 1999 bearing the same name. This 6-track EP covers all the remixes for the Notorious and Skin Trade singles, although completely ignores the Meet El Presidente remixes. At first I was confused as to why A View to a Kill was included, but given that that song had never appeared on a 12-inch release, it actually makes complete sense. We're now onto the final 12-inch vinyl release that Japan saw, and that is 1988's Big Thing album. Despite the first single, I Don't Want Your Love, being available as a 7-inch single, the Big Thing album was the last time Duran Duran would appear in Japan on vinyl. The second single, All She Wants Is, was only released in Japan as a CD single, and when coupled with the fact that I Don't Want Your Love also came as a CD single containing all the remixes, that signaled the end of the special EPs. The Big Thing album is nicely presented in a gatefold sleeve, and ironically, despite it being my least favourite of the 1980s releases, it was the most expensive to add to my collection. By 1988, the CD format was the preferred choice for music buyers in Japan, and that pretty much signaled the end for vinyl. I'm so happy that I was able to pick these up over the last few months, as they represent a wonderful time in history, and the unique look to the sleeves is something I really appreciate. So, to answer the question, did the Japanese get a better deal? I would say yes and no. While I think the idea of putting the missing tracks out on special EPs is an incredibly efficient way of doing things, I think I would have preferred the option of being able to buy the 12-inch singles. But as records were a high-cost item in Japan in the 1980s, maybe this was the only way they could make it work. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments section, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.